is James Dearsley here on behalf of whathouse.com, the new homes property portal. And I'm here today joined by both Gary Murphy and Stephen Murphy. I don't think they're related in any way at all. From Allsop and from Clearview Homes. And we're going to be talking about something which I think is actually a particularly interesting topic. If any of you join us regularly for these one-to-one interviews, you know that I like the technology world, I like the digital world, and here we're sort of combining two things together. And it all occurred around the 11th of June this year. So I'm going to ask Gary Murphy from Allsop. Gary, would you mind explaining to everybody here who have been watching this video exactly what happened on that date and why Allsop are quite excited by it?
Yeah, on the 11th of June we closed an auction sale of 36 apartments in West Drayton for Clearview Homes. We've been marketing for 4 weeks exclusively online, and the idea was to generate a market online for the apartments amongst investors, amongst owner-occupiers, and basically encourage people to enter a virtual auction room on the 11th of June to compete against one another for these particular apartments. And we closed the bidding down at 5-minute intervals from 10 o'clock consecutively. So each lot was offered one after the other. We didn't start offering one lot until the previous lot had been sold. The objective was legally to achieve binding contracts on the fall of the virtual hammer, and we went through a lot of legal advice with counsel and solicitors to ensure that the process was legally effective and could achieve binding contracts in that way on the fall of the hammer. So it sort of replicates the auction room, if you like, to get everybody bidding in a competitive environment, but purely online to buy property.
And that's it, isn't it? That's the point. It's a purely online process. I love this idea of a virtual hammer. Yeah, just trying to imagine the person there without it's like a click of a mouse rather than the click of the hammer. But yes. And it must be said that it's the online aspect of this which is so exciting, because arguably it's the first of its kind, certainly within the new home sector, I understand.
Yes, I mean in the new home sector certainly. Yeah.
And so, one of the things I've got to ask, I mean, from Allsop's perspective, I mean, you know, you are renowned for the last 100-odd years to be specialist in this, I suppose, the physical auction space within the commercial and residential world. So, why this move? Why this shift into an online-only sort of orientation within the auction sector?
Well, I think if you look at the principles of auction first off, I mean, as you say, we've been doing this for decades in a live auction, and we can achieve fantastic prices by harnessing all of this competition. It occurred to me about a year ago, just looking at the new homes market, that house builders were taking schemes overseas to roadshows, perhaps in Asia or Middle East or America, and were selling phases of schemes to investors in those territories. But there was no competition generated between the buyers in one territory against those in another. Of course, it's impractical to invite them to come to an auction room physically in one place because of the distance and the time lapse and what have you. Then I thought, well, there is the scope to get everybody around the world bidding for these particular units in an online environment.
Yeah.
You can accommodate the time differences through various means by leaving proxy bids or automated maximum bids online, and through that global competition, of course, it would be, you know, foreign investors competing with UK investors as well. Through that competition, theoretically, we could maximise prices and hopefully achieve a better receipt for the developer.
Absolutely. I mean, it's a very interesting concept, isn't it? This whole online competitive element to it all. And I suppose I'm bringing Stephen in here for a second from Clearview Homes. That was probably something which really attracted you to it from the start, I presume, Stephen, which is doing something very different in order to maximise your marketing efforts for this new development. Is that right?
Certainly. It wasn't so much the competitive edge. I, for some time, had been thinking, look at the way the internet is moving. In the old days, you bought your flights from a travel agent, and then with the introduction of EasyJet, it went online. That's become commonplace now to buy an airline ticket. And I used to sit here thinking, we have a run up with buyers, you have to negotiate, take the reservation, go through the 28-day process before they exchange contracts, and you've got a binding sale. And at any point up to then, the buyer can drop out. So I was always thinking it's got to go online. That's why when Gary pitched me with this idea, okay, it's great, you've got a competitive marketplace, but it was really, I think this is the way forward for property sales. They will go online. It's probably early days, but that's what really attracted me. And as soon as he mentioned it, I said, yeah, we'll be in for that. It gives you the binding contracts.
Absolutely, and I think that is something which is really, really important, because as a developer, obviously, you need the certainty to sort of move things forward, and that's, if I'm understanding this correctly, Gary, obviously, from the auction side of things, as soon as the virtual hammer has gone down, there are basically contracts signed within the next 24 hours. So that's certainty. Am I right in that?
Well, the virtual hammer, the closing of the sale online, as soon as we announce online that the sale is closed, that's a binding contract. Because in law, if you're selling property by public auction, then the fall of the hammer or the closure of the sale, whether it's a physical hammer or another way of indicating that the bidding is now closed, at that point there's a binding contract of sale. And technically speaking, legally speaking, you don't need a written contract in law for that to be enforceable. At an auction, once the hammer falls, that's binding. And that can be replicated legally and has been in the online auction environment.
And that's got to be an attractive thing. That certainty must be very attractive.
No, I've got mortgage, yeah.
It's certainly attractive to our clients. I know, as Steve has said, it was attractive to Clearview because there's no backing out. I mean, clearly that has to be made very clear to buyers, because they need to have completed all of their due diligence.
I mean, how many lots were sold on the day, and has it been sort of measured as a very distinct success for you?
Yeah, I mean, firstly, to just touch on that, it was effortless for us as a developer. We gave the project to Gary. I didn't have any interaction with buyers until the auction itself, when bidders' names appeared on the screen, and within minutes we had a binding contract. So it was very automated, and that's what we really like about it. In terms of numbers, we offered 36 units for sale. We sold 13 within a couple of hours, and 2 subsequently followed shortly after, where people were just a little bit unsure of the process and then immediately attended the offices of Allsop and signed contracts. So we came out of it with 15 out of 36 units fully exchanged, deposits following shortly afterwards, and that process, it really is so seamless. That I feel when online really moves forward, it is the way forward.
Absolutely. I think the priceless term you've used there is this effortless tag, yes. And I think every developer needs to sort of understand that. I think it's an incredible thing. And I think one of the things which I've actually picked up from this auction section is that you're saying so 40% of lots were sold there or thereabouts on the day. Mm-hmm. A little bit less, as I understand it, and Gary, please correct me if I'm wrong. But I've had some figures verified at around 65% from physical auctions will get sold on the day. But it's a quote from another auction house that said that this situation that you guys went through was an absolute eye-opener for the industry. And I don't think you can get better sort of a pat on the back for what you guys have done as the industry standing up and recognising what you've done to call it an eye-opener. So I'm certainly expecting to see an awful lot more in this moving forward. But one of the things that I suppose I want to sort of put to both of you here is this statistic that I really picked up on, that 15% of the interested parties were non-UK. Gary, was that something you had expected from the outset from your side, or not?
Yeah, we would expect overseas buyers to come to an auction sale. Our database, which is we've got about 220,000 on the the auction database alone who are voluntarily subscribing to receive our catalogues. And we know that a large majority of those are overseas. So we did expect to receive overseas interest in the West Drayton lots. The first phase of the scheme was primarily of interest to UK buyers, but we wanted to do what we could to expand the audience, both right across the country and as far as we could around the world.
And Stephen, was that the same sort of from you? Were you expecting that level of non-UK, interest? Was it something that you've had at Clearview beforehand, or was it really as a result of this eventuality here with Allsop?
No, it was a result of the auction. Generally, we would sell to a local market, so really we opened up our marketplace here. The only way you would normally, a house builder would expect these sort of overseas sales is to take something abroad, and I think we know the cost of that. It can be very expensive taking something overseas. Here it was, a normal agency fee would apply, and there was no downside for us. You can risk 100, 150, 200,000 on a roadshow to Hong Kong, Singapore, and if that flops because you've got competition out there, you've got bad weather out there, people don't attend, that's wasted money. Here, our downside was very minimal, and it really attracted the new concept of the way things are going to go. And I wholeheartedly believe that property will be sold this way more and more.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. There's one thing which I'm very passionate about in terms of how developers are selling their units abroad is this archetypal Asian road trip around, as you said, Singapore, Hong Kong, the classic places where even now the buyers over there know the hotels where they're going to be, they know the times they're going to be there, and the fact is it's geographically and time delimiting. Unless they want your development, unless they are in that situation at that time, you're not going to reach those buyers. And so it's a massive risk at 200,000. I'm sure there are many who spent far more than that transporting great big physical models around the world. It's a frightening sort of proposition. So for me, this attractiveness from a developer standpoint is very exciting in the sense of, as you said, you've got the binding contract aspect immediately. The geographical element to an online auction means that anybody, anywhere with an internet connection, and with Allsop, with your large data you just said there, Gary, it's got to be an attractive option for these developers to take hold of. But what we haven't really talked about, and Gary, maybe you want to sort of bring on this, because I read an interesting quote from you beforehand, is looking at the advantages from the potential buyer's perspective, because there must be a massive upside for these guys as well, if I'm correct.
Yeah, I think that's right. We've read an awful lot about, the political sensitivity of London and UK homes going overseas to foreign investors early, so that UK investors aren't actually, occupiers aren't getting a look in first. And I think this is the one thing about this method, as with any auction, is it's completely fair. It's a level playing field. If you're in the UK and you want to buy that particular unit or selection of units, it's there for you to bid for on the day of auction. You will have to compete with everybody else, so you don't get a priority pass, if you like, to the showroom and to the sales room. You have to come to the virtual auction room and bid. But if you are the highest bidder, then you'll buy the property, and that's what auction's all about, and it's what markets are all about. It's not giving anybody an advantage other than the highest bidder, and it's a completely level playing field. It's incredibly transparent as well, because you can't see the bidders, but you can't see who they are, but you can see on the screen that bidder number 1 or bidder number 2 or bidder number 3 has bid against you, and you can see it escalate, and you just have to keep bidding if you want to buy. So it might be a little more nerve-wracking, and auctions can be nerve-wracking for buyers, but they can also be incredibly exciting. And with a scheme like Stephen's or any other developer schemes, there are other choices of apartments to buy if you're unsuccessful in your first choice or second choice.
It's funny you said there about the word nerve-wracking, because I think it's quite an interesting thing, because I think sometimes a lot of people are put off by going into a physical auction room in itself for being nerve-wracking, and yet they're far more comfortable being sat behind their computer screens. And I think you've used a very, very important word there, this whole transparency aspect of it.
Yeah.
I don't think we could ever underestimate this word transparency in the world of property buying now. And equally, I mean, obviously, this world, there's no chance of being gazumped at all. When you've bought it, you've bought it.
And it's all there. You're gazumped in 5 minutes, in a very open way. But that's auction. I mean, I think that's interesting, actually, the point you make, James, about, people may not want to go into a live auction room, and I guess that can be quite nerve-wracking. I've seen people, particularly those who've entered an auction room for the first time, who are nervous. What you can do with this particular model, you can be incredibly disciplined about your bidding, because you can set your maximum bid prior to the auction starting. So I'm only going to go up to 380,000 for unit number 2, for example.
Yes.
You can set the maximum bid, and the software will incrementally bid for you. You might buy it for less. You won't buy it for more than 380.
Yeah.
If your mentality is I don't want to be tempted to bid higher than my limit, you set your limit automatically online.
Yeah. What better way? I mean, and that's another model that people are happy with. I mean, the whole eBay model is built upon that as well. So you're encouraging people who perhaps have not done this before to feel comfortable with it immediately. So it's an amazing proposition.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, look. I'm going to sort of finish this off with I suppose a last question. Stephen, you obviously had a lot of success with this the first time round. Is it another option for you in the next development phase you're going to be releasing?
Definitely. We will use this option again and again, and I just believe with the passage of time, people will become more familiar with it, and it will become a definite way forward. It's a very efficient way of buying a property. There's no gazumping, there's no time wasting. You log on, you set your price, or you continue to monitor, and you bought the thing. As you say, with eBay, with any online purchase, and people are becoming more savvy about online purchases. The only thing here, it is a large amount of money. The properties range between £250,000 and nearly £400,000. So you are spending quite a big sum of money in one here. But I spoke to a purchaser afterwards, and she just couldn't quite commit to the auction process. But after it was over, felt she'd missed out. She attended the offices of Allsop to do the deal. At some point, you have to commit, whether you ponder about it for 28 days and then go in and sit with your solicitor and sign the bit of paper and say, make the call, let house, you're committing. It's just getting familiar and comfortable with that process. Many of the investors that bought were very easy with it and bought multiple units. So yes, we will definitely do it again.
Can't say further than that, can you? And is there any sort of final comment that you've got there at all, Gary, from your side and Allsop, and whether you're going to be sort of venturing into this more often for you?
Yeah, there's one point I want to make. I'm glad that Stephen found the auction day effortless. But what you have to remember is that the online auction method it focuses on a day like any auction, and it's the online bidding process that closes down the transaction. Prior to that, it's anything but automated. Yes, of course, there are sales particulars, legal documents available online. Yes, you can download those. You can do an awful lot online, but there's no substitution really for personal interaction, if you like, between us on behalf of Clearview and the buyers themselves prior to auction. People still want to speak to somebody about their purchase. A lot of people aren't used to the process and would prefer that they were guided through it, by a person online. Although we've used technology, we did a lot of FaceTime between buyers right up until the auction sale. Just for many reasons, either to just engage with them or to verify their identity once they'd uploaded their legal documents. So the more and more the technology comes into play, but there's no substitution for good old-fashioned estate agency when it comes to engaging with people and actually getting them into the auction. That's not to be done.
I couldn't agree with you more. It's one of the things I often talk a lot about using technology in the property sector, and one of the slides I always insist on putting in is saying that sales and revenue generation are as a result of human interaction. It's just the very nature of that human interaction that is changing. And I think it's an acknowledgement that you've got to augment your material, augment your marketing with some aspects of this, which makes it, as you term, effortless. So I think it's effortless on two sides there, Stephen, from both your side and from a buyer side. But you've got to have that initial understanding that there are humans involved in this process, and I think it's a really important point. So I'm going to finish it on that because I think there's a really interesting side of that. I think also, I mean, Gary, you've done a great job with that. I think Stephen, getting up there, being the first new homes developer, I think it's really, to use that term again, eye-opening within the sector. I think certainly should win some plaudits for that as part of your campaign. And thank you both for joining me here today on this What House 1-to-1 or 1-to-2 interview series. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Lovely, thanks everyone. And obviously, as again, this is one-to-one interview with whathouse.com, the property portal for the new home sector. So I hope you'll join me for many more. Thank you.